Hi folks, welcome to another episode of My Life with Robert Burns. Jim Thompson and Douglas Mackenzie here again to talk to one of our cronies from around the Burns world. Hi Jim.
Hi Douglas, hi everybody.
Tonight our guest is a former president of the Dumfries Burns House Burns Club. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Callum Watson.
Good evening, Jim. Good evening.
Hi Callum, how you doing?
I'm all right, thank you.
What's the weather like down your way?
It's been a lovely day. I've actually been across the border today. I was in Longtown playing at a wedding earlier on, so it was an absolutely glorious day in Englandshire today.
Very good. Well, our audience will find out what you play when we get a bit further into this conversation. But we always start off with the same question. Callum, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
I'm an Annanite by birth. I come from the town of Annan. I'm born and bred there. My mother and father came from there. I had three brothers and a sister. My oldest brother Ian, my late brother Les, and I've got a younger sister, Morag. So we were all brought up there until Ian and Les moved. They all joined the police and they moved to Glasgow and Edinburgh. But my sister's still in Annan.
And did you do your schooling in Annan as well?
Yes, I went to Newton Primary School and then Annan Academy. In fairness, I couldn't wait to leave either establishment. So I left school at 16 and started work. I worked with John Nicholson and Company as a storeman. And then I served my time as a plumbing and heating engineer. And then from there, I joined the ICI, firstly at the Nobel's explosives factory at Proudfoot, and then later into the ICI in Dumfries, the new Melanex plant. Did
your time as a plumbing and heating engineer involve you in a lot of activities in folks' houses and such like?
Yes, it did. We were mainly a domestic plumbing and heating company. George F. Simmons in Annan. Sadly, George is departed now. I worked there for about 5.5 years.
We know a lot about plumbers in New Cumnock Burns Club because I think half of our committee are plumbers.
When I was in the plumbing, the money wasn't as good as it is now.
So what did you do at ICI?
I was a process operator making Melanex film. And I did that for about 5 years, and then I decided to join the police. So I joined the police in Dumfries and Galloway, and I served almost 30 years until I retired unbelievably about 4.5 years ago now.
Wow.
Can't believe I've been away as long.
Yeah. So what branch of the police were you in?
I worked mainly in community policing, operational policing, and then I worked in offender management unit for the last 9 years before I retired.
And was that all in Dumfries and Galloway?
That was all in Dumfries and Galloway. I didn't stray very far from Dumfries. I was reminded when I retired, you have to do a wee pen picture of where you've served. And my sergeant did say at that time, "You've not been posted very many places." so which I was quite thankful for. While I was in the police, a group of us formed the Dumfries and Galloway Police Pipe Band. So I was pipe major of the band for 20 years. So that maybe led to me being kept quite central.
And when did you start with the piping? Is that something you did from a kid?
Well, my father played. My father was a member of the old MacLean of Annan pipe band. And then before it became, and then he joined the Annan Royal British Legion. But he also played when he was in the 1st Battalion King's Own Scottish Borders. And after we had the family, obviously my older brother Ian, he learned. Then my late brother Les, he learned the pipes, and it just naturally followed that I would learn. So I was about 9 years old. In fact, I've been playing for 50 years this year.
Wow, that's tremendous. And I bet there's quite a lot of experiences when playing the pipes or places that you've been and such like.
Oh yes, it's. I mean, when I was growing up, all my pals were going out to play football, and my dad was telling me, "No, you're not going to play football, you're going upstairs to practice. You sort of, I wouldn't want to say you resented it, but you know, it was a bit of a pain when you would have rather been out kicking a ball about. But when I look back now, it was a great thing to get into. An absolute, a fantastic hobby. It's got me into places that I would never ever seen before. I met people that I would never ever met, just through being able to play the pipes.
And did you go into a lot of competitions?
I competed as a juvenile for about 6 or 7 years, and then I didn't really turn professional in going to professional contests very much. And when I was an adult, I more geared towards pipe bands.
But from a personal point of view, you've kind of made a career out of piping, have you not?
I have that, yes, I have that. In fact, some of my former colleagues in the police would say that they never called me Callum the policeman, they always called me Callum the piper. If anybody needed a piper, then they would usually come to me. So I now have made a career out of it, because that's what I do for a living. I play at weddings and funerals, dinners, burn suppers, etc.
I noticed on your Facebook page that a lot of these weddings are down at Gretna.
Yes, I have 2 or 3 venues that I'm there quite a lot, but I've kind of moved into Gretna just of late in the last year or so. With the COVID pandemic, people were looking for pipers that were far nearer the Gretna base for travel. So I've been playing down there a wee bit.
Any big events that you've piped at that you could tell us about?
I think probably the biggest one would be in 1996, during the Burns Bicentenary. I was asked to pipe at the Houses of Parliament. The government held 2 burn suppers. They held one at the Banqueting Hall in Whitehall, and they held one up here in July, and that was at Chambly House, just on the outskirts of New Abbey, just on the outskirts of Dumfries. So I met the Prime Minister attended both of them, all the cabinet of the day, and all the different politicians. Quite funny that the one that I played at the Banqueting Hall at Whitehall, Donald Dewar was the Scottish Secretary at that time, and he called a 3-line whip at 10 o'clock, which meant there was about 380 people in the hall, but a lot of them were MPs. But because it was a 3-line whip, they had to attend. So the burn supper had to shut down for about an hour while all the MPs left to go and vote and then come back. And I'd thought it was Donald Dewar that called the 3-line whip, and I thought it was a wee bit disrespectful. However, I met Lord Robertson. He came and did the immortal memory at the Hove Club. I think it was about 2010, 2011. And I mentioned this to him. I said it was a bit disrespectful, and he went, he says, not disrespectful if you know politics, Callum. So what had happened was, it was the Conservative government of the day, John Major, had decided that to try and win over the Scots voters, they would go and have a go at having a burn supper and marking the bicentenary of Robert Burns. And basically, they decided they were going to lay wreaths at Poets' Corner the morning of the 25th of January. However, they didn't invite the opposition. So they were seen as trying to take it all for themselves. So Donald Dewar had went, oh well, that's fine, but we'll just have a 3-line whip during your burn supper at night. So that would appear to have been what was behind that.
Oh dear, oh dear.
But it was a nice experience.
So you went from piping as a plumber to piping as a career in music. Any other interests or hobbies that you can tell us about?
To be quite honest, if you're playing the pipes seriously, you didn't have time for anything else. I was pipe major of the pipe band. It's not a full-time job, but you've got stuff to do all the time concerning it. You know,
because you would need to leave a bit of time for doing the police stuff.
A wee bit, aye. But this is going out as a broadcast, so I did a lot of police work too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you talk about, being in the police pipe band was a great thing, you know. We're across in France and Norway, Germany. We were given time off to go and compete, so it was a real privilege to be allowed to do this, and we got to go to some great celebrations. So it wasn't a chore to be in the band, and we were supported to the help by the bosses.
Excellent. Before we move on to talk about Burns, do you want to give us a wee mention about your family or something like that?
Yeah, my oldest, well, obviously my dad taught us. My dad taught us to play, and my older brother Ian, we all played together in the Annex Service Club pipe band. And then my oldest brother Ian, he joined he joined Lothian Borders Police, and then transferred to Strathclyde in 1989. My late brother Les, he joined Lothian Borders Police, and obviously I joined Dumfries and Galloway Police. So it was quite unique at the time to have three brothers all playing in all serving in different police forces, but all playing in different police pipe bands. My brother Ian was a piper with Strathclyde Police, won 3 world championships with them. My late brother Les was a former pipe major at Lothian Borders Police, and obviously I was pipe major in the band down here.
Fantastic! What an achievement!
It was, yes, it was a really. We were invited to the police college to meet the commandant at the time, Hugh Watson, no relation. They were trying to do a celebration of everybody that came in to help at passing out parades and things like that. So the 3 of us went up and met him. It was quite funny, really, because he walked in at 10 o'clock in the morning into his office, and Les, Ian and I stood up. He says, "Oh, sit down, lads. You'll be for a half." the Tully Allen malt. He was sound. He was sound. So he was.
Callum, we can see your garden through the window there. Is that where you do your practicing?
That's actually the high street.
All right.
I stay in the high street in Lochmaven. So that's one of the trees that grows right outside my window.
Very good.
I didn't practice in the garden. I practice in the house behind closed doors, just so because it's an old house, so you can't hear it inside. So I didn't annoy the neighbours too much.
Very good. Well, we've talked a wee bit about Burns, and obviously your piping comes into your Burns story as well. So no doubt we'll get back to that. So maybe Jim, you could take over now and get Callum talking more about his interest in Burns.
I was actually laughing there when he was talking about the police and pipe bands. I was a section sergeant in the Central in Glasgow in 1982, and that's where the pipe band were based. And they never saw an angry man in their whole life. Smashing bunch of boys right enough. Right, how did you manage to get involved with Burns?
I think my first recollection of Burns was my mother brought me a small. It was basically, she was an Anderson. Her maiden name was an Anderson. Whether it attracted her when she was in a shop in Moffat, but there was a wee book of Burns poems with the cover in the Anderson tartan and a wee bust of Robert Burns in the front. And she brought it home as a present to me, and I tried to find it for tonight, but it's in a box in the loft. And it must have been when I was about 8 years old. And that's my first recollection of thinking about who's Robert Burns. But because we played it, we played at Burns suppers for years and years. I think my first ever Burns supper was when I was 10, maybe just stretching it to 11. So it was just something I've grown up with. And obviously, even as a youngster, when you go to a Burns supper, you sit through all the poetry. and you sit through the immortal memories, and it was, I just got bitten by the bug, I think.
I mean, I know you're a piper, but you've obviously been involved with the House Club in Dumfries, so you've got into Burns in a way, I suppose.
Yes, it's. I would have to say, it was a privilege to be asked to be the president of the House Club in Dumfries, but to be quite honest, being a member would just be enough. I mean, you've been there, Jim. You know, to sit in the Globe Inn during a House Club Burns supper or dinner of any type, and to be sitting in a place where Burns was known, you know, guaranteed to have frequented. It's got a special atmosphere about it, a real special atmosphere about it. So it was a privilege to be the president of the House Club, but just being a member is a privilege. It's fantastic.
It's frightening to think how many Burns suppers you must have attended over the years, particularly being obviously being a piper.
My very first Burns supper, as I say, was in Bridekirk Church Hall, which would have been probably about 1972, 1973. And I always remember my dad gave it, and it's a pet hate of mine now, when you hear pipers that play the haggis in and out with a tune that's not a Burns tune. Because my dad, he gave me 2 bits of advice before I went that night, as a 10-11-year-old. He said, whatever you do, when you pipe the haggis in, pipe it back out, play it in with a Burns tune. And he said, when they give you a drink, no matter what it is, you've got to over and a winner. I went, right, Dad, no bother. So I kind of fell foul because obviously being in a church hall, there was no alcohol, and I was only a wee boy anyway. I wouldn't be getting alcohol. But it was green ginger wine. And I'm not joking. I could hardly see my way through the tables to get back out. I downed this half and I won. I remember it to this day. The tears were streaming down my face when it was in my throat. I'm trying to play these bloody pipes. So that was his 2 bits of advice. But I mean, for a while there, I was doing maybe 17, 18 Burns suppers a year. You know, as Jim Heenan used to say, you know, I wasn't Santa Claus. I couldn't get round them all on the 25th of January. So the Burns season went through the 3rd week in January through to the 1st week in March. And it's a season Jim Heenan called Ramadram. You know. But no, I must have done hundreds of Burns suppers over the years.
Right, you've obviously played an awful lot of Burns tunes as well. Any particular favourites?
Well, I've actually brought this along. This is called the Southwest Scotland Connection. It was written by a friend of mine, Karen McCrindle Warren. Now, Karen's a graduate from the Royal Conservatoire in Glasgow, and she's actually brought. There's 4 volumes of this. This is I'm not trying to sell them, but 4 volumes, and the amount of Burns songs and tunes that you can play on the pipes is unbelievable. And that's where I get my pet hate, that there's so many Burns tunes available, but a lot of pipers don't actually pipe them when you're taking the haggis in and out. And one of my favourite, obviously, A Man's a Man for All That. It's a cracking tune. I mean, I play My Love She's But a Lassie Yet. I play it every time I pipe a bride, unless the request's different. Every time I pipe a bride out of the ceremony, I play My Love She's But a Lassie Yet. Absolutely cracking tunes. There's another one here. Karen has actually, she's researched the tunes, and I'll need my specs for this, but there's one in here. She's done a wee bit of research. Now, I found it very, you know, you get a wee bit of folklore with some people and some stories. I've again through Burns, I started to do a wee bit of speaking, and I was asked to toast the faculty of advocates in Dumfries, and I've been looking at kind of legal things, and I obviously read about jokes, and I don't know if you've ever heard about, you know, when Dick Turpin held up his last coach, and he says, stand and deliver, and everybody got out the coach, and he says, I'm going to rob all the women and I'm going to have Hoch Magandi with all the men. And the coach driver says, have you not got that mixed up? And the wee boy at the back says, you leave him, you, Dick's the boss. So, but as I read into Dick Turpin more, it said that Dick Turpin was a member of the Essex gang, and to cut a long story short, he wouldn't let the state hang him. So when he was up on to be hung, he threw himself off so that the state couldn't actually hang him. So he threw himself off the stone. And I'll leave my glasses for this, but Karen writes about Macpherson's Lament, or Macpherson Rant, as we sometimes know it. And she went, this tune was published in the Scots Musical Museum Volume 2 in 1788. It was well kent afore Burns, but he added the verse that thought it gave its principal merit. Macpherson was a freebooter who was executed in Banff in 1700. And when coming to his end, he played this tune, to which he bequeathed his name on his treasured fiddle. He offered the fiddle to anybody that could play the tune over his dead body at his wake. Nobody could play it, so he smashed the fiddle over the executioner's head and flung himself to his death. Now, I just found that because I love the tune, Macpherson's Lament. It's a lovely tune in the pipes. But it was funny how things kind of cross over, and you would never know if that's the truth, but that goes down in both.
He played a string and he danced the room. Wonderful, wonderful tune, and you get it quite often at Burn Suppers nowadays, thankfully. I mean, the pipe one that I hear most, I don't know whether you do it or not, is Duncan Gray.
Duncan Gray, yes, that's another cracking tune.
It's certainly well used. Do you get about speaking at Burn Suppers much?
I've toasted an awful lot of lasses in my time over the last sort of 5-6 years. I've done a couple of Immortal Memories. In fact, I've been asked to do the Immortal Memory at Dumfries Burns Club because they're reconvening in 2022. So I'm writing an Immortal Memory for that just now, and hoping to form it round Burns tunes, a sort of Piper's tribute, if you want.
Well, that's certainly a unique place to come for a Piper's tribute to Burns. I'd like to hear that in myself. But I mean, in terms of Burns Suppers, well, in terms of Burns, you've obviously a past president of the Hove Club, and have you any other current involvement in terms of Burns?
Well, I'm also a past president of the now sort of in storage Hole in the Wall Burns Club.
Oh, right.
I was president there in about 2000. And it was about the year 2000 I joined the Hove Club. And it was really my only club that run alongside. I'm a member of the Royal Dumfries Volunteers. Chris Lyon, I don't know if you know Chris, and a good friend of mine, Peter Camillo, they formed the Royal Dumfries Volunteers in about 1998, I think it was. And there was only, I think there still is only 14 of us, but the criteria is that you can't go, you're not there to just sit and have a good night. You can't go to one of these things if you can't do it. So you need to be able to recite, or you need to be able to give a short lecture, or you need to be able to play an instrument. So you take on the persona of one of the Dumfries Volunteers. Peter and Chris went and researched it, and I'm Robert Locke, piper to the core. And I'm also in the Cammy Goodall as the Bachelors Club. We've got a Burns Club in the Bachelors Club now, so Cammy, I'm one of the founder members of that. So it's a great night, and a privilege to be invited to these things, because I remember a few years ago, loving Burns and his work the way I do. In the space of 10 days, I sat at a Burns supper in the Bachelors Club, which is a fantastic space, I'm sure you'll agree. And then I was at another Burns supper in the Globe Inn in Dumfries. And then Les Byers, who used to be the curator at Ellison Farm, invited me up to Burns' kitchen. We had a wee Burns supper in his kitchen. And 3 places just steeped in Burns. Really privileged to be able to go to places like that.
Callum, we've teased the audience a wee bit. We're talking about pipe tunes and Burns, and you're talking about the pipe tunes and your immortal memory and such like. Is there any chance you could give us an example of some of these tunes?
Yes, I can do that. I can give you a wee Burns medley, no problem.
That would be brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that, Callum. Absolutely terrific. Thoroughly enjoyed it. But can I maybe just change tack a wee bit with you in terms of, I mean, you've been telling us quite clearly and wonderfully about Burns tunes. Have you any favourites of these poems at all?
Yes, I do. Tia Mouse is probably my most favourite poem. And it's funny how you're always learning in the Burns in the Burns world. I remember sitting. I used to arrange a Burns supper for the Dumfries division when I was in the police. We did it for 13 years in the trot, and had great help from all my friends in the Burns community. But Professor David Purdy did an immortal memory for me one year, and he built it round Tia Mouse. And you know, I was sitting there and astounded when I realised that, you know, Burns had wrote the first verse in Scots, in Old Scots, and then the second verse in perfect English. And he went through the whole poem like that. And I had never noticed that before. you know, for it being one of my favourite poems, it was just so interesting to hear him talk about it, and how, you know, Burns had been able to pick out the old Scots perfect English, old Scots perfect English. Another favourite is Tam O'Shanter. You know, having been going to Burns suppers for years and years, I used to my shame, I used to look at someone getting up to do Tam O'Shanter, and I would go, here's 12, 15 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back. Until I saw a young lad, Scott Rorison, who sadly, I believe, died during the pandemic. Not sure if it was related to the pandemic, but he was an Annan boy. And he was at a Masonic Burns supper at St Andrews in Annan. And he stood up on the stage and he did all the actions, and he did Tam O'Shanter. And I've loved it ever since then, because I never really understood it. It was just a kind of shut off when it was on. And it's a brilliant poem. In fact, that my lockdown project was to learn it. Because four of my favourite lines in Burns, you know, pleasures are like poppy spread, you seize the floor, its bloom is shed, or like the snowfalls in the river, a moment white and melts forever. I just think that's absolutely beautiful. That those four lines are probably my most favourite lines that Burns ever wrote. So actually, I set about learning it. It was always something I was going to do, and I set about learning it. And I can't believe how much I've learned about the poem just by sitting and you know, memorising it. And I've seen myself once I got it off, I was going round Halays, my local walk with the dog, and I would recite it twice. So, you know, and it's just a brilliant poem. I don't think the dog's that happy about it. She'll know it now. Because it's a quiet walk, you're just in the countryside, and I sometimes think, I wonder if anybody's standing watching me and me hollering my head off. Well,
Callum, you've given us your favourite verse. Given that you've had the lockdown project and learned it, can you give us maybe a couple more verses?
I like when it all sort of comes down. Now hear my muse, her wing one cower. It's like flights are far beyond her power. To sing how Nanny Lappin flam, a supple jade she was and strand, and how Tam stood like een bewitched, and thocht his very innermost. Even Satan glowered and fidged from fain, and hotst and blew with might and main, till first a caper, sin another. Tam tint his reason all together, and roars out, well done, cutty sack. And in an instant, all was dark. And I sit, and you can't stop yourself, really. You know, I'll be walking in this walk, in an instant, all was dark, you know. Well done, cutty sack. And it's just a fabulous piece of work. It must be one of the greatest literary works that I can think of. I mean, what a story.
I'm just imagining the reaction of the dog when you belt out, well done, cutty sack, at the top of your voice.
Well, she just kind of looks up. I can see her, you know, when Chapman Billies leave the street, I'm going, oh, no, this again. But when I was learning it, my wife and I used to go walking, and she had it on her phone, and I would recite it just to make sure it's right. So my wife could probably have a fair stab at it now as well. Can
I come back to your piping, and obviously piping at weddings and such like? Do you actually get requests for Burns tunes when you're piping? I mean, you mentioned "My Love Is But a Lassie Yet," and the fact that that's what you use when the bride's coming out of the church. But do you get requests for other Burns things?
Very, very few. Highland Cathedral's the by far the favourite for weddings and funerals and anything else in between. You get more requests at funerals for Burns tunes. Another tune that's one of my favourites, and it just goes to show how you learn. I remember hearing a slow air being played by the Grade 1 Boghall and Bathgate pipe band. Fantastic outfit. And I always liked this tune, and we decided as the band we would play it. And there was a guy in the band, Kev Bell, he says, I'll write it out. And he called it Boghall. and that because we didn't know the name of it, but I really, really liked it. And I was playing at the Hole in the Wall, and at the Hole in the Wall after the Immortal Memory, there's always a lament. So I thought, I'm just going to use that tonight. I'm going to play that tonight. And the then owner of the Globe, Maureen McKerrow, came up afterward and she says, I love that lament, Callum. She says, and how apt? She says, it's one of my favourite Burns tunes. I went, all right, it's by Burns, is it? She went, it's the Westland Wind.
Aye.
And you know, I've played that ever since. Just played it for you know, I do the lament at the Burns statue on the 25th of January every year. I've done it for, well, we missed it last year, but I've done it for about 26 years in the store. And you're always struggling to find something to play for the lament after Immortal Memory, and that just fits just perfect.
Yeah, it's a very, very haunting melody.
Well, and beautiful in the pipes too.
Yeah.
So I've got Boghall and Bathgate Pipe Band to thank for me learning that.
Excellent.
I need to stay away from Thomas Shanter. I just get in this black hole 3 years of my life going missing again. But it's nice to hear a piper who actually can recite Burns. Pipers are famous at Burns suppers for other stuff, if you get what I mean.
I've had a few then nights.
There's a fella, Gregor, and I used to go to a lot of Burns suppers with, and I've just never seen anybody who could drink that. And he came home sober. Well, he was upright.
Aye. I remember being at a Masonic Burns supper down in Whitehaven, and there was an old pal of mine, Willie Linton, who was driving, and myself and Peter Carmelo came back up the road in the car, and I'd won a bottle of wine, so that went as well. And when we got to, I lived in Dumfries at the time, and it was a house that had a vestibule, front door, vestibule, and then an internal door. And Wally got me out of the car with great difficulty with my pipe box, put my pipe box inside the house, put me inside the house, and shut the door. And basically, I couldn't bite my fingernails, and he basically put me into a box. I couldn't get out of the kind of where I was. so yes, I've had a few good nights in Burns supper wise.
It's actually quite ironic. You stayed in an Annanite. You stayed in Dumfries, and you're now in Lochmamen. That's 3 of the 5 Garlands. You planning to stay in the other 2?
It's I can't see me moving from Lochmamen. It's a beautiful wee town. So I absolutely love it here. It's a great place to stay. I'm not sure it has many Burns connections though. I've kind of looked, and I don't think he's I can't find many Burns connections to Lochmamen. But I could be wrong. Someday after this podcast, they'll probably go send me an email going, here they are.
Well, as long as you don't move up to Black Joanne, we'll be fine.
Well, I toasted the lassies in the Black Joanne a few years ago. That was we used to go dressed in our Royal Dumfries Volunteers uniforms, because we call it a uniform. It's basically a jacket that we got made. So we used to always go dressed in them, the Black Joanne. They were always a great night.
Peter Carmelo's a lovely man as well. He was my interpreter for some Ukrainians came over to visit, and Peter was great with them, and obviously could speak the language. A great Burnsian as well.
Oh, fantastic. He was another one that always had Tia Moose embedded in his immortal memories. They were great, just the way that he went through it.
When you were doing your piping, any trips abroad with the pipes?
Yeah, there was. We went to Tonsberg in Norway. We had a really good trip. We were a part of a Dumfries and Galloway week that went to Tonsberg, and quite a funny story that the bass section, the togs as we used to call them, they had togs, the old kits. Sadly, Alistair Starkey, who's now departed, he was sleeping in the bottom bunk. We were put in this youth hostel accommodation, and Alistair was, we'd taken a bit of drink. Alistair was in the bottom bunk, and Henry Irvine, one of the tenor drummers, was on the top bunk. And as it was really, really light across there, it was 100 degrees during the day. It was cracking weather. But about 3 o'clock in the morning, Alistair woke with a jolt to see this bit of wood skiting across the tiled floor, quickly followed by Henry Irvine in his black underpants. He'd rolled against the side of the bed, and it had come loose, and he'd right out of the bed. So Henry brought his soul to his knees and right up onto his legs, and he said to Alistair said to him, "Henry, are you hurt?" He says, "Of course I'm hurt. I spoke to you on the way by and you ignored me."
Very good.
That was a great trip to Norway. We were across there for 4 days.
Excellent.
Great research.
With that piping and been involved in the Burns movement, you must have met a few people, famous people. Could you recount a few of them to us?
Yes. In fact, I've met a few famous people through the Burns connection. I mean, obviously, I mentioned I'd been down at the Houses of Parliament. I met the then Prime Minister at the time, John Major, Michael Forsyth, who was his Scottish Secretary. Quite a funny story attached to that. It was just after the peace agreement in Northern Ireland, so the security was a wee bit more, I wouldn't say lax, but it wasn't as tight. So John Major was walking from Downing Street across to the banqueting hall. So I was waiting to pipe them in, and there was a whole barrage of national photographers there to take photos. And this guy through the Sun came up and he says, "When John Major comes in, can you ask him to have a go of the pipes?" Now, I don't know if you've ever had a go of the pipes, and there's a lot of technique about it, and it's not the easiest thing to do, just to be thrust this octopus, if you like. So I mentioned to John Major's private secretary, I said, "You realise that, of course, that they're going to ask me to give him a go of the pipes." So he says, didn't enter into that. He says, "Just didn't ask him." I said, "Right, no bother." So, and it just shows you how these people think. The guy through the Sun eventually went, "Piper," and I went, "Yes." He says, Prime Minister, would you like a shot of the pipes?" And John Major went, "I would love a shot, but just not in public." And that just shut the whole conversation right. It was quite interesting as well that night. That there is a Bill McHugh, who I'm sure you all know. Bill and Moira Anderson were singing that night, and Bill McHugh and Moira Anderson were at the top table. And Bill McHugh told me a story that he had been sitting along with Ken Clark, and as the haggis was about to get piped in, Bill got up to go and address it, and Kenneth Clark had said, "What's happening now, Bill?" He says, "I'm going to address the haggis, it'll get piped in." And apparently Kenneth Clark's went, "Oh, no more pipes, not more pipes." And Bill had said, "Do you not like the pipes, Kenneth?" He went, "I'm not a fan." And Bill McHugh had went, "That surprises me, because most foreigners love them."
Very good.
So I've played for the Queen. I've piped the Queen at police headquarters. Joanna Lumley, who obviously she has a house in this area, she was at Ellison Farm when we had the ploughing march. I think that was 2009. I think that. So we got to meet her. She was lovely. So I've met a good few people through piping and through the Burns world as well.
Tremendous. Well, Callum, we're getting to the end of this, and you told us earlier on about one of your favourite tunes was Westland Winds, and I wonder if we could persuade you to finish off this episode with giving us that on the pipes. Is that a possibility?
That would be my pleasure. It's a beautiful, beautiful tune in the pipes.
That would be tremendous. So it just leaves me with the opportunity to say thank you very much for giving us your time and telling us all about your life with Robert Burns. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.